"You're not allowed to park there." The words hit me like a slap in the face as I climbed out of my U-Haul, my muscles aching from a grueling 10-hour drive across state lines. I'd just pulled into Pinewood Estates, a gated community with pristine lawns, sparkling fountains, and houses that screamed, "We're better than you." The kind of place where every mailbox is identical, and the hedges are trimmed with surgical precision. I was ready to start fresh, but apparently, Pinewood had other plans. Standing in front of me was a woman in a bright red blazer, clutching a clipboard like it was a badge of supreme authority. Her name tag read, Karen, HOA President, and her pinched expression told me she was the type who lived for rules and relished enforcing them. Her hair was a helmet of perfectly sprayed curls, and her voice dripped with condescension as she pointed at my U-Haul, parked temporarily on the quiet street. "This is a violation of community guidelines," she snapped, slapping a neon orange sticker on the truck's windshield. "Move it now, or you're looking at a $500 fine." I blinked, still processing the fact that I'd been in this neighborhood for all of 10 minutes and was already being targeted. I tried to explain, wiping sweat from my brow. "Ma'am, I'm just unloading. I'll move it as soon as I'm done." But Karen wasn't having it. She thrust a rulebook thicker than a phone book into my hands and said, "Rules are rules, and you'll learn to respect them around here." Her smirk screamed, "I own this place," and her eyes sized me up like I was some clueless renter she could push around. Here's the kicker. I wasn't just some random guy moving in. I'd inherited this sleek, modern house from my late uncle, along with 11 other rental properties in Pinewood Estates. That's right, I was the landlord for half this fancy neighborhood, including the McMansion Karen called home. My uncle had been a silent investor, letting a property management company handle the day-to-day, but I'd decided to move here and take charge myself. I knew the ins and outs of every lease agreement, every tenant, and every dollar flowing through this community. Karen, however, had no idea who she was dealing with. As she lectured me about maintaining property values and upholding community standards, I kept my cool, nodding politely while my brain screamed, "Oh, lady, you're about to regret this." Her power trip was almost comical, but I could tell she was used to getting her way. Little did she know, I wasn't just the new guy in town, I was the one collecting her rent. And if she thought she could bully me with a fake fine, she was in for the shock of her life. Karen's neon sticker glared at me like a warning sign as she disappeared down the street, her heels clicking with self-righteous purpose. I stood there, still clutching the HOA rulebook, my U-Haul half unloaded, and a knot forming in my stomach. Something about her rush to slap me with a $500 fine felt wrong, way too aggressive for a first offense. I'd dealt with HOAs before, and this wasn't just Karen being a stickler. It smelled like a setup. I hauled a few boxes into my new place, a gorgeous 2-story with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Pinewood's pristine lake, and plopped onto the couch to crack open the rulebook. It was a beast, filled with nitpicky regulations about everything from grass height to mailbox colors. I flipped to the section on parking violations, my finger scanning the fine print. There it was, clear as day. All violations require a written 24-hour notice before fines can be issued. My blood boiled. Karen hadn't given me a notice, she'd gone straight for the fine, demanding cash on the spot. This wasn't just a power trip, it was a straight-up scam. I leaned back, replaying her smug lecture in my head. Rules are rules, she'd said, but she was breaking her own. I'd seen this kind of thing before, HOA tyrants who bullied newcomers into submission, banking on them not knowing the rules. But Karen had no idea who she was messing with. I wasn't just some guy renting a house. I was Dicey, the landlord who owned 12 properties in Pinewood, including hers. My uncle had left me the keys to half this neighborhood, and with that came power I was ready to use. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of the orange sticker, then jotted down every word Karen had said. If she thought she could intimidate me into paying up, she was in for a rude awakening. I started unpacking my essentials, clothes, laptop, coffee maker, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just about a parking fine anymore. Karen's attitude, the fake urgency, the way she waved that rulebook like a weapon, it all screamed, predator. I was willing to bet I wasn't her first target. How many other residents had she strong-armed into paying fake fines? How deep did this go? I set the rulebook on my kitchen counter, a plan forming. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I'd play along, let her think she had the upper hand. But behind the scenes, I'd dig into her game. As the landlord, I had access to records, leases, and a property manager who knew the dirt. Karen wanted to play dirty. Fine, I'd show her I could play smarter. That night, I turned my new house into a war room. Boxes sat unpacked as I spread out my uncle's property records across the kitchen table, the WA rulebook open beside my laptop. I own 12 of Pinewood's 20 rental homes, including the sprawling McMansion where Karen lived. My uncle had been a silent landlord, letting a property management company handle everything, but I wanted to be hands-on. Karen's stunt with the fake fine was my wake-up call. This neighborhood had a problem, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. I started with the rulebook, combing through its endless regulations. It was a maze of petty rules. No unapproved paint colors, no lawn decorations over 12 inches, no trash cans visible after 8 p.m. Each violation came with a fine, and the WA president had discretionary authority to enforce them. That phrase stuck out, discretionary authority. It was a blank check for someone like Karen to do whatever she wanted. I flagged every rule that seemed ripe for abuse, my gut telling me she'd been exploiting them for years. Next, I called Dave, my uncle's old property manager, who answered on the first ring. "Dicey, you're stepping into a hornet's nest," he warned. He spilled the tea on Karen's reign of terror. For years, she'd been targeting new residents, especially renters, with fake fines for minor violations, like planting unapproved flowers, leaving bikes out, or even hanging holiday lights a day too long. She'd demand payment on the spot, claiming the money went to community funds for things like park upkeep or holiday events. But Dave had his doubts. "I've never seen a dime of that money go to anything but her pocket," he said. "The community center's been falling apart for years." Dave sent me a folder of complaints he'd collected from tenants over the years, dozens of emails about Karen's bullying. One tenant was fined $200 for a non-compliant mailbox, only to find out the rule didn't exist. Another paid $300 for landscaping violations after planting tulips Karen didn't like. The pattern was clear. Karen was running a racket, preying on people who didn't know better or were too scared to fight back. I dug into my uncle's records next, cross-referencing Karen's address with her lease. She'd been renting her house for 5 years, always paying on time, but now I wondered where that fine money was really going. I found a clause in the WA bylaws allowing the board to audit financial records. That was my in. Karen wasn't just an annoying WA president, she was a wannabe neighborhood mob boss, and I had the tools to take her down. The next morning, I was sipping coffee when a sharp knock hit my door. There stood Karen, her red blazer practically glowing with authority, holding a $500 fine notice backdated to yesterday. "Pay up, or this goes to the board," she said, her smirk so smug I could have framed it. She thought she had me pinned, but I was ready to flip the script. I put on my best confused new guy face and invited her in for coffee. "Let's talk this over," I said, gesturing to the kitchen table. Karen hesitated, probably expecting me to beg or argue, but she followed, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a shield. As we sat, I poured her a cup, keeping the mood light. "Before we settle this fine," I said casually, "can you confirm your address for me?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly thrown off, but rattled off her address with a huff. I opened my laptop, pulled up my property management software, and turned the screen toward her. There it was, her lease agreement, with my name, Dicey, as the landlord. Her face froze. "Wait, you're the owner," she stammered, her coffee cup trembling in her hand. "Yup," I said, leaning back with a grin. "I own your place, plus 11 others in Pinewood. Funny thing about that fine," I slid the WA rulebook across the table, open to the parking section. "Says here you need to give a 24-hour written notice before issuing any fines." This, I tapped her backdated notice. "This doesn't follow the rules." Karen's smugness evaporated. Her eyes darted from the rulebook to the laptop, then back to me, like a cornered animal sizing up an escape. I didn't stop there. "I'm also auditing the HOA's finances," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Those community funds you've been collecting. I'm curious where they're really going." Her face went from pale to ghostly white. She opened her mouth to speak, but all that came out was a weak, I need to check with the board." Before she could bolt, I added, "Oh, and Karen. As your landlord, I'll need to see your payment records for those fines you've been charging tenants. You know, to make sure everything's above board." She mumbled something incoherent, grabbed her clipboard, and practically tripped over her own feet getting to the door. As it slammed behind her, I couldn't help but laugh. I'd turned her own game against her, and the look on her face was worth more than the $500 she'd tried to scam me for. Karen thought she was the queen of Pinewood, but I'd just shown her who really held the keys. Karen's hasty retreat left me buzzing with adrenaline, but I wasn't done. Over the next week, I turned detective, diving into the HOA's financial records with Dave's help. What I found was a goldmine of corruption. Karen had collected thousands in fake fines, $200 here, $300 there, for violations that either didn't exist or were enforced illegally. Bank statements showed transfers to an account tied to her name, not the HOA's community fund. Forged notices, backdated like mine, littered the records, and tenant complaints painted a picture of a neighborhood living in fear of her clipboard. She'd been running this scam for years, pocketing cash while the community center's roof leaked and the park's benches rotted. I called an emergency HOA meeting, inviting every resident and board member. The community center was packed, the air thick with tension. Karen sat in the front row, her red blazer looking more like a target than a badge of authority. I stood at the podium, laptop hooked to a projector, and laid it all out. Slide by slide, I showed the forged notices, the bank transfers, and a spreadsheet totaling over $15,000 in suspicious fines. Gasps rippled through the room. One tenant, an elderly woman, shouted, "She fined me $150 for my granddaughter's tricycle." Others chimed in, sharing stories of Karen's bullying. Karen tried to save face, stammering about misunderstandings and clerical errors, but the evidence was airtight. I sealed her fate with a final slide, the HOA bylaws, highlighting her violation of the 24-hour notice rule and her misuse of authority. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president. As her landlord, I took it a step further, serving her a notice: repay every cent of the stolen fines within 30 days or face eviction. Her face crumpled as she realized she'd lost everything: her power, her reputation, and soon, her home. A month later, Karen paid back $15,000, scraped together from who knows where, and quietly moved out. Her McMansion got a new tenant, a friendly family who waves when I drive by. Pinewood transformed overnight. Residents started a group chat to share ideas for improving the neighborhood, and I lowered rents for my tenants, earning their trust. The community center got a new roof, funded by the recovered fines, and the park got new benches. I park my truck wherever I want now, no stickers, no drama. Every time I pass Karen's old house, I grin, knowing I turned her scam into a win for everyone. Pinewood's not perfect, but it's a place where people can live without looking over their shoulders for a red blazer.